Excitable? You bet I'm excitable. We're trying to put a guilty man in the chair where he belongs. Someone starts telling us fairy tales and we're listening.
What made you change your vote?
He didn't change his vote. I did.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film and explore its themes, its history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a voiceover artist and host and co-host of numerous shows here in Los Angeles on the Collider Network and pretty soon on the Geek and Century Network. So
Really?
See. Yes, we shall see.
Oh, well, then maybe we'll have exciting news to talk about in the Cine-Files.
There are negotiations happening.
Well, be tough.
Thank you.
Be tough on your negotiations.
We shall see.
So normally when we talk about our films, the first thing I do is ask you what your experience is, but I think I'm going to start.
Okay, sure.
Because I think you're going to have more to say. So the film we're going to talk about today is 12 Angry Men.
Yeah.
It's
1959.
Starring Henry Fonda. It's Sidney Lumet's first film. And I'll tell you, here's my experience the first time I saw this film. I have no memory of when the first time I saw this film was.
Okay.
I think it was in college.
Sure.
I loved it when I saw it. It's right up my alley because it's courtroom drama. We already talked about that. I like that. It's dialogue. It's smart. It's just great acting. And I remember loving it, but I don't remember my first experience. So how about you?
I would say that I think I'm a little bit in your boat. I remember seeing it certainly in high school at some point, and I don't know if it was on TV or on PBS, and I was transfixed and became a massive fan of the film ever since because of it. When you're a young kid and you're still growing up as to be a young adult, young man, to see all these different types of men enclosed in a space for an hour and 36 minutes, it really gives you a crash course on the personalities of men.
Well, and this is a real character study. I mean, you can sit there and examine each of these fully realized people in a single space. I mean, I can't think of any movie that more gives you that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an exciting film for so many different reasons, even though they never leave the room.
So is there anything else you might have done with this film?
I mean, what Steve is leading to, I think, is that I was so inspired by this film that when I got out of the military in 1998, I went back to college at Florida State University. I'd gotten my AA degree at night, and I went to study acting and directing. And the first time I was allowed to direct a play, I did Glengarry Glen Ross, which was nice. But when I decided that I wanted to make money to come to LA, I started a production company in Tallahassee called Rising Storm Productions, and I directed the first play I wanted to direct was 12 Angry Men. And there was such a resonance in the play that I thought I could modernize it, and I directed it, and I had African Americans in the cast, I had women in the cast, I adjusted some words, and I got permission to call it 12 Angry Men instead of 12 Angry Jurors, which is the updated version that Samuel French or whoever that owns the rights with Reginald Rose gives you the permission to use as the title for a play,
which is just not as good a title.
And really isn't. And no offense, neither is 12 Angry Women. This, in my mind, because I grew up with 12 Angry Men in my mind, that's the one that I resonate with the most.
There's just certain words work. 12 Angry Men sounds great. 12 Angry Jurors doesn't sound as great.
Not so much. Yeah, agreed.
It just doesn't sound as great. Yeah. So it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I knew you had done Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah.
And this one, I hadn't thought, those are two manly, talky plays you chose.
Those are things that appealed to me when I was directing, and I did Titus Andronicus.
Whoa.
So there we go.
That's a lot.
Yeah. But this film...
You didn't think of doing like Noises Off, light comedy, A Flea in Your Ear, or something?
I suppose if I'd kept directing, I would have found myself to those things. As people know, I'm kind of a jovial guy. I would have found my way to those things.
But you did the heavy, let's get into it stuff.
But I like it to do the heavy stuff to make it accessible and to make it something that people want to explore. And there's so much in this film that is so exciting to explore, so fun to explore, so moving to explore, and still resonant in 2016.
Well, and this is something which I think is true of 12 Angry Men. Yeah. I think it's true of Glengarry Glen Ross. Yeah. It is not true of Titus Andronicus.
No.
But is that they are fun in their way. They're dealing with some stuff, but partially because of the rhythm of the great dialogue, partially because of the great characters, they're fun. And this movie, as you said, it's like an hour and a half.
96
And it
minutes.
goes fast.
Yeah.
It is completely engaging beginning to end. So let's back up and talk a little bit about the film. This film has a really unique origin story, which is that this film came from television. That's happened a few times, but I can't think of any example where it's as profoundly happened as well as this. And to know about this film, you need to know a little bit about live TV. So in the early to mid 50s, there was live television happening in New York. And they would do, obviously, sitcoms, which were kind of used to being live. There was live variety shows, which the closest thing we have today is Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of them, Milton Berle and Sid Caesar and Ernie Kovacs and those kinds of shows. But they also did live dramas, which is something every once in a while you see them, like ER did a live drama and some other shows, which I drawn a blank on. But every once in a while they'll do them. It's extremely difficult. And they did them every single night of the week. And they had not only great writers like Patty Chayefsky and Rod Serling being two of them, and the third probably top writer at that time is Reginald Rose, who wrote this one. And then they needed a constant stream of actors. And the actors they're drawing on are the theater actors, because they're the ones who are capable of doing a beginning to end show. You got to have theater actors
every night,
every single night. Yeah. And so they brought in these theater actors, and that is the generation of the method actors. That is when those people that we know, like Marlon Brando and James Dean, started coming along. But it's also the cast we see in this film. Yeah. Also people like Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman. And these are those young generation of actors who are starting in live television. And so they do this play. It's 1954. Do you know who directed it? Because I didn't know. I just found out.
I did not.
Franklin Schaffner directed, and Franklin Schaffner we have already talked about, director of Planet of the Apes, and Patton directed the original 12 Angry Men in 1954.
Right.
And it was on, I forget which series it's on.
Probably on CBS, probably Playhouse West or something like that. Whatever it was. Yeah.
I looked it up.
Yeah.
And now I can't
American Playhouse or something.
It's one of those.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of these.
There were.
And Henry Fonda sees the show and goes, I want to do this as a movie, and he's the person who gets the ball rolling.
This film, this play, when it bites the right person, can motivate that person to put it on, because everyone can find some universal truth in it through their own prism when they put it up. And you see it here with Sidney Lumet's version as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's interesting to me about Fonda is, like, we think of stars want to be stars. Yeah. In other words, stars are interested in their own ego. They want to be. And what does Henry Fonda choose to do? An ensemble piece.
Yes.
And
Heston would never do an ensemble piece.
No.
Not at that time.
And it's sure Henry Fonda is the lead of the ensemble. But it's still an ensemble piece.
Yeah.
And so he says he wants to do it, and they bring in Sidney Lumet. And Sidney Lumet, this is his first film, and he was a TV director. He's one of the guys who had been doing these TV shows. And he has an interesting origin. So his father was an actor. His father was a famous actor and playwright in the Yiddish theater in New York. And for those of you who don't know, there was a huge Yiddish Jewish population from Germany and Eastern Europe living in New York, and they had a whole Yiddish community that had Yiddish newspapers, Yiddish books, Yiddish theater, Yiddish music, all of this that was self-contained. And so Lumet grew up acting in the Yiddish theater from the age of 4 years old, and then moved to Broadway at 11. So he's a Broadway actor at 11, was in 14 plays. He's with huge actors on and big, huge Broadway shows. So that by the time he's 18, he's a pro.
Yeah.
And the thing he says that's just interesting about acting with is what it gave him was it gave him tremendous respect for craft and zero awe. And I think I like that idea a lot.
Absolutely. Once you remove the inability to speak to an actor because you're intimidated by that actor, no matter the star status, you get a stronger directorial performance, because they have a vision, and the actors will fall in line for the most of the time.
That's absolutely. And it ceases to be magical.
Yeah.
Like when you have awe and you look at the great actor, you go, oh, how do they do that?
Right.
But when day to day, you see them get up for their work, and particularly on Broadway, where you have to do 6 shows a week, and sometimes you're sick, and sometimes you're hungover, and sometimes you don't feel like doing the show, and you watch that actor put it together and get out and give the show, you learn about the craft.
Well, and sometimes it's 8 to 10 shows a week if you include matinees.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I've done. Have you ever done that? I did a matinee 6-show a week run for a couple of months as an actor. It's brutal.
It's brutal, especially if you're in a drama.
Yeah.
Massively big.
And I had small parts. I never had the big parts. But it was still, particularly the second show on the matinee day, you're literally off stage gossiping about where you're going to go out drinking tonight, then walk on.
Yeah.
Have the scene, walk off, you're back right in the middle of the conversation.
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean you're not doing a good job.
No.
Yeah, so that's his origin. And at the same time, he became part of the group theater. And the group theater, for those of you who don't know, this is where Elie Kazan and this is where the method came to the U.S.
Like a Stanislavski, you think?
Yeah, so the Stanislavski method comes to the U.S. in the 30s and 40s. Yeah. And one of the first big important theaters that did it was the group theater. It's Waiting for Lefty. Who's the author of Waiting for Lefty?
Oh, isn't that Chayefsky? Clifford Odets. Clifford Odets.
Right. So he's this great playwright in the theater. Strasberg is in the group theater.
Yeah, of course he is.
All these guys who become the formation of the method are in this theater, and that's where Lumet is.
Yeah.
And he's right at the beginning of when the Actors Studios formed, and he didn't like it and got kicked out. Yeah, he just thought it was too. He said they were too much in one system, which is this method, which you see all these actors come out of.
Right.
And he said, yeah, that's great, but we should learn how to sword fight and use our speech, and they should learn what Grotowski and Meyerhold, and he wanted to do all this stuff. And they said, no, this is what we're doing. They kick him out. He forms his own theater. And then he ends up because there was this need for people who understood actors and the theater to come to television. And this is the early 50s. Yeah. And he comes and he starts to be an assistant director. And his boss, the director, is Yul Brynner.
Wow.
Yep, who we just talked about recently in Magnificent Seven. Yul Brynner was a regular TV director. And do you know why Yul Brynner left directing television?
To be an actor.
Because he got cast in The King and I.
There you go.
And he was debating, like, should I do this dumb show or should I stick to my regular?
And you mean the stage version? You mean the stage version?
Yes, he was cast in the stage. Oscars, Rogers and Hammerstein wanted him to be the lead, and he's debating, and finally he decides to go. And who gets to take over his gig is Sidney Lumet.
Wow.
So Sidney Lumet, then now it's 7 or 8 years after that, and he's going to direct his first film, and he gets handed this very small budget, beefed up teleplay to make into 12 Angry Men.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting story because also Fonda comes on as producer, and they produce the film together.
Right.
They do it in 21 days, a compressed schedule, and Fonda never produces another film again.
Yeah.
Because for him it was too exhausting to manage all those actors, even when it was shot in one room.
Right.
I'm sure he said to himself, if I can't even handle one room, I can't imagine a film where I have to go in multiple locations. You know, so much involved in the film that comes through because they're all involved. They're all stuck in a room. They're having to stay in the room until they make a decision.
It's so difficult filmically. And normally you think, like, if you watch plays, I mean, this isn't exactly a play. It becomes a play actually after the movie, but when you watch a play being made into a movie, the first thing they do is go, how are we going to open this up?
Yeah.
How are we going to get into more locations and have more movement? Because just filming a stage play is not going to look good.
Right.
And Lumet, I don't think there's any other choice, goes, you can't open this up. It's in a room.
Yeah.
And you look at the choices he makes filmically to make it still exciting.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, particularly when you think about a first-time director.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was able to use wider angle shots at the beginning of the film to get you feeling like there's an expanse in the room, there's a distance between these characters because they don't really know each other. They've just been sitting in a jury room, they've gotten the case presented to them, then they go into the jury room and they start, and then as the film progresses, he gets lower and lower in terms of the camera angle to the point where he's using close-ups and real tight shots and from below shots by the end of the film, so you get the sense of tension and building drama between Lee J. Cobb and Henry Fonda. And maybe this is, I don't know, I don't mean to steer anything, but maybe this is the right time to talk about the casting. I don't know. What do you...
Well, let's before we get to that, I want to just because you brought it up, is talk a little bit about lenses.
Oh, yes, please.
So just because we want to always drop back and talk a little bit about the filmmaking.
Absolutely.
So you're absolutely right. He uses wide-angle lenses at the beginning, and what wide-angle lenses do is they have a deep depth of field, which means they tend to have more stuff in focus, and they tend to make space look bigger. So you're looking at a wide space. And so, for instance, if there was a person standing 3 feet behind another person and you got a wide angle lens, it would look like that person is 8 feet behind them.
Yeah.
When you have a long lens, which means like a telephoto lens on your camera, then what happens is spaces become much smaller and things go out of focus. So that person who's now still standing 3 feet behind the other person looks like they're right over their shoulder, and the rest of the room looks totally out of focus.
Yeah.
And so what he did, which is just as you described, beginning of the movie, high angle, wide angle lenses. So you see this big expanse, the room looks really big. We go to longer and longer lenses through the course of it, and the camera gets lower and lower, so it looks claustrophobic. People are right on top of each other, and now we're into these close-ups, things are going out of focus. And that's disciplined filmmaking.
Yeah. For a first film.
For a first film.
Right.
And the one other thing I want to talk about, and I tried to thinking about how to explain this without getting technical,
Okay.
and how to do it with audio, because you really need visuals to understand this, is there's a basic concept of filmmaking, which is the 180-degree rule, or we call this the line. And what this basically means is that when you're filming things, you're going to break everything up into wide shots and close-ups and over the shoulders and all these things. Right. But you always want to create the illusion that people who are looking at each other look like they're looking at each other.
Yes.
And that's harder to do than you would think. And the best example I can give you is like, imagine you're at a play, and in the play, 2 people are on the stage talking to each other, and you're in the audience, and one person's on the left and the other guy's on the right. And if you moved way over in the audience to the right side of the audience, you would look up, and the person who was on the right, still on the right. The person who's on the left, still on the left. You move over to the left, same thing. But if suddenly you were magically transported onto the stage behind those characters, and you open your eyes, the 2 people would have switched sides.
Yeah.
So when you're filming, you basically talk about the line, which is like in a stage where there's a line between the 2 people, and you can only stay on one side of it.
Right.
If you go to the other side, it will no longer appear like they're talking to each other. It'd look like someone's talking to the other person's back.
Huh.
Okay. What you want is someone's on the left side of the screen and they're looking towards the right. The other person on the right side of the screen looking towards the left. But if you cross the line, there'll be one person on the left side of the screen looking to the right, and the other person will also be looking to the right, and they will not be looking at each other.
Right.
Even though in the reality of the room, they were looking at each other.
Yep.
So when you have 2 people, you have one line to worry about. It's pretty easy. If you have 3 people, you have 3 lines, because you have John is talking to Steve. That's one line.
Yeah.
If Shirley walks into the room, well, then you have John to Steve, John to Shirley, and Steve to Shirley.
Right.
I made the mistake of my first feature that I made. I decided to do one with an ensemble of 6 people who talk in a room 4 or 5 times in the course of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of lines. And every time someone moves, the lines change because everyone's eyes shift to a different spot and you have new lines. And it gave me a headache. And there were times where we had to stop shooting.
Yeah.
So me and the DP can sit and go, where's the line? Which way? Should this person be looking to the left or to the right?
Makes sense.
Lumet's first movie is 12 people all in the room for the whole movie. The whole movie, he has 12 lines to think about.
Yeah.
And every time someone moves, you have to figure out, okay, now that he's crossed from here to here, is Lee J. Cobb looking to the left of camera or to the right of camera?
Right.
And that is like major headaches.
That's beyond script consulting. Oh, it's
Yeah.
beyond, you're mapping everything out and then making sure people are watching to make sure like where they looked or when they it's a lot to keep track of.
It's a lot. So and if everything I just said completely confused you, first of all, I'm very sorry about that. And second of all, it's much easier if you can see it. I'm sure if you go on YouTube and look for the 180-degree rule or crossing the line, they'll show you examples of it and it'll make sense to you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that. Now let's get to much more important details, which is casting.
This has been the Steve Information Moment, brought to you by the Cine-Files.
Go ahead. Should I get the more you know? All right. So casting.
Yes.
The best.
I mean, amazing.
Yeah.
Henry Fonda, Lee J. Cobb, E.G. Marshall, Jack Warden, Jack Klugman, so many fantastic. Ed Begley Jr.'s father, for those of you who are big Christopher Guest fans.
Martin Balsam,
who I absolutely love, who you've seen in Psycho, numerous other films through the 60s and 50s.
Well, and if you watch these people, and I think this movie is worth watching for watching the people who aren't talking.
Absolutely.
Look at the background. Look at what else is going on. If you watch them, it is a textbook on American naturalistic acting.
Yeah.
This is not Shakespearean acting. This is not some strange Eastern European acting. This isn't no drama acting. This is the 1950s naturalism.
Yeah.
And you watch, those characters are so real and so well developed and so just like, yeah, that's a real person.
Yeah, I've seen this film so many times. I mean, so many times that I watch one juror every time I watch the film.
Yeah.
So I focus on one juror. I've seen it at least 12 times because I've focused on one of the jurors every single time I've seen it so that I can catch those moments. This time around, I focus on Ed Begley, and it was fascinating to watch his reactions because I'm looking for the acting moment where it's not believable. I'm looking for the acting moment where they're overselling the situation, and none of them do it. None of them do it. It's very real. It's very authentic. I don't know if it's method or any of that stuff. It's very authentic and real and relatable and connectable as the viewer. You never doubt a moment that's happening in this film.
Let me describe the plot just a little bit.
Sure, yeah, let's do
because
that.
I think it's going to help us as we talk about the
Absolutely.
actors.
We probably should have done that at the beginning. But
So
yes,
here's the plot is very simple.
Yeah.
Is that we begin at the end of a trial, and the judge, who is quite bored, which I think is great direction.
Absolutely.
He's bored, in a completely not caring way, says,
You've listened to a long and complex case, murder in the first degree. A premeditated murder is the most serious charge tried in our criminal courts. You've listened to the testimony. You've had the law read to you and interpreted as it applies in this case. It's now your duty to sit down and try and separate the facts from the fancy. One man is dead. Another man's life is at stake. If there's a reasonable doubt in your minds as to the guilt of the accused, a reasonable doubt, then you must bring me a verdict of not guilty. In the event that you find the accused guilty, the bench will not entertain a recommendation for mercy. The death sentence is mandatory in this case. You're faced with a grave responsibility. Thank you, gentlemen.
you jurors now have to decide basically whether this guy lives or dies. It's a
Right.
murder trial. The death penalty is involved.
Mm-hmm.
They go off to the jury room. There's a little bit of chit chat,
Mm-hmm.
and they take their first vote, and 11 people vote guilty.
Yeah.
And one person, Henry Fonda, says not guilty.
Yep.
Boy, oh boy, there's always one.
Oh, what are we doing now?
I guess we talk.
Boy, oh boy.
You really think he's innocent? I don't know.
But I think this is a person's life, and I think it's important enough that we talk about it.
Yes.
And then the rest of the movie is just this discussion of this murder case.
The film is America. The film is America. That's the thing about that I love about the film. It encapsulates America. There are archetypes. There are stereotypes within the film. There are, with these characters, there are things you recognize, but they're all real. And also what I think is fantastic about this film is that the kid is ethnically ambiguous. It's not a black kid. It's not African, but it is a kid who could possibly be Latino, who could possibly be Eastern European. He could be Armenian even. He could be any number of race, even Italian. He could be any number, and that's what's so great about the casting. And that kid doesn't say a word. He's just a kid.
You see his face for one shot.
We see his face for one shot. And it's very reminiscent of Sal Minio's face to a degree.
Yeah.
And so you have that. And so that leads you into the feeling of like, you as the viewer can decide what race he is. So when you're watching the film, or when you're watching the deliberations that happen, you can decide what race they're deliberating about when they talk about like, oh, these people and, you know, they're lower class or they're uneducated. Those things that they say, you can confront your own stuff as a viewer when you're watching it. And I love that.
Well, and race plays a huge part in this film,
Yes.
right from the beginning.
This kid's been kicked around all of his life. You know, born in a slum, mother dead since he was 9. It's not a very happy beginning. He's a wild, angry kid. That's all he's ever been. And you know why? Because he's been hit on the head by somebody once a day, every day. He's had a pretty miserable 18 years. I just think we owe him a few words, that's all.
I don't mind telling you this, mister. We don't owe him a thing. He got a fair trial, didn't he? What do you think that trial cost? He's lucky he got it. Know what I mean?
No.
Now, look, we're all grown-ups in here. You're not going to tell me that we're supposed to believe this kid knowing what he is? Listen, I've lived among them all my life. You can't believe a word they say. You know that. I mean, they're born liars.
Only an ignorant man can believe that.
Now, listen.
Do you think you were born with a monopoly on the truth? I think certain things should be pointed out to this man.
Come on, this isn't Sunday. We don't need a sermon.
Come on, we have a job to do now. Let's do it.
There are times when I've seen this film and gone, oh, maybe that's a little too on the nose for
Right.
today. Maybe people wouldn't quite expose their racism in such a... And now I look around today and I go, yeah, maybe it still would work that way.
I think
because if it was a Muslim person today,
Yep.
you get the same thing.
Same that you'd have people in that room saying the
Yeah.
same thing
Yeah.
about them and then having their own words turned back on them as well from their
Yeah.
own experiences.
But the movie's more complicated than just being about race. It's definitely about race.
Yeah. And so the crime is this kid killed his father. They think they have the evidence that he's...
Well, he's been accused of killing his father.
Yeah, right. He's been accused, and they think that it's a slam dunk case, right? 11 out of the 12 think it's a slam dunk case. The one person dissents, and then you start the process of deconstructing the entire case through Henry Fonda's eyes, and his desire to get them just to talk about it leads to his almost inadvertent desire to try to change their minds about whether he is guilty or not guilty. And he never overtly is trying to make him not guilty. He just wants to talk about it. I think at every moment, Henry Fonda is waiting for someone to change his mind, and no one can come up with the right argument to make Henry Fonda stop, or juror number 8, as he's called, stop and say, okay, guilty.
So I want to talk about Henry Fonda.
Yes, let's.
There's a thing Sidney Lumet says about him that I think is 100% true, which is that Henry Fonda can't say something that isn't true. When he says something on screen,
That's a great
you believe
way
it.
to describe him. Yes.
Maybe. Maybe the boy did kill his father. Didn't hear the scream, did run out in a panic, did calm down 3 hours later and come back to get the knife, risking being caught by the police. Maybe all of those things happened, but maybe they didn't. I think there's enough doubt that we can wonder whether he was there at all during the time the killing took place.
If you look at his career, you look at he's Tom Joad in Grapes of Wrath.
Yes.
He's Abraham Lincoln. When Henry Fonda says something, that's the truth.
Yep.
The truth is he sees it at least.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, being able to say what you're saying, that's a difficult skill for an actor.
Oh, it is. And the thing is, it's almost like Tom Hanks. I mean, you can make the correlation from Henry Fonda to Tom Hanks. And not that Henry Fonda was any kind of goofy comedies, but you can make that connection because he kind of assumed the mantle of the everyday man.
I would always put Tom Hanks with Jimmy Stewart.
Ooh, that's great. Okay. So who would be Fonda's...
Let's see. I played this game before. Okay. So I put Harrison Ford was Humphrey Bogart. I put.
Ooh, I could see that. Okay.
But this is not the game we're playing.
This is not the game.
Right. I'm not sure who the Henry Fonda is. Henry Fonda, Kevin Costner at his best.
Okay, maybe. I can't 100% go with that.
We will continue this game off mic.
Either way, I just think what's great about him is what you're saying, bringing it up is absolutely correct. When you watch Henry Fonda in anything, Grapes of Wrath, on Golden Pawn, even up to On Golden Pawn, the man does not have an inauthentic moment, including Once Upon a Time in the West.
Oh yeah, that's why he's terrifying.
Right, exactly, because he's so believable.
Yeah, because I'm just saying what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and this is it.
Yeah,
and so when he says, I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't get the sense that it's manipulative.
Right.
You get the sense that he's saying, I don't know, which is really important because the standard for convicting someone of crime is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
And that's what this movie is about. This movie is about, do you have doubt? And at the beginning of the film, they all say, yeah, he's guilty, 100%. Yeah. But when you watch, and I love this opening moment, and I thought about this a lot when watching this movie this time, is the reasons that they're doing what they're doing is often not because I think this guy's guilty. What you see in that opening vote is you see them all looking at each other.
Yes.
And you see them all being within a society and worrying about how are other people voting? How are other people feeling? How will I be perceived in this thing? And that's why they're voting the way they're, and they all want to get out of there.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, if everyone else thinks he's guilty, he must be guilty. And that's why they do it.
Right. And that's what's so interesting when you watch it as Henry Fonda starts to turn each of them throughout the film, you see the ones that go first.
Right.
Then the harder ones. And that's what's so interesting because you're right. That whole thing about peer pressure is there. And that happens. Studies have been proven all over them. Like if someone starts running, 10 other people start running with them.
Absolutely.
Just because they think there must be a reason that person is running. And so they've done multiple tests over the years to test human reaction and especially male reaction to peer pressure around other males. This feeling of needing to be part of the group, right? It is very intrinsic and primal in our makeup as human beings and as men.
We want to fit in. We want to do what we're supposed to do.
Exactly. We want to be cool. We want to be accepted.
There's the famous study where they had people come in and give electroshocks.
Yes.
They thought they're giving electroshocks to someone who's screaming, and there's a doctor saying, okay, give them more. You're
right.
And the person's screaming and begging, and the people continue to say, are you sure I should give them more? Yeah, it's part of the test. You have to do it. And they would do it. And of course, there aren't really electric shocks going on. It's fake.
No, right.
Because the test is to see what people do. And interestingly enough, the people that said no were female nurses. That's who said no.
Of course.
I'm not doing that. But the men were the most likely to go, okay, if you say so.
We're more violent as a gender, as a species.
Well, and easily warped by what the
Yes.
establishment says is okay.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing to think about. And you see it very much at the beginning of the movie, and you get to see right from the beginning these great actors and these characters. So let's go through them a little
Sure.
bit. So let's start with the person with the biggest opinion when we come in is Lee J. Cobb.
Right, the white John Roca. Yes.
Okay. You're going to have to explain that a little bit. How is Lee J. Cobb the white John Roca?
He's my basic body type. And when I'm
big guy,
yes,
voice.
he's a big guy. When I'm fervent or angry about something, I can be as obstinate and stubborn as he is.
Yeah.
I in my younger years, I could have been as vitriolic as he is in this movie. And so for me, I always feel sympathy for Lee J. Cobb because of the thing with his son, which they introduced kind of early in the film to lay the groundwork that this is going to pay off later in the film. And no matter how many times I've seen this movie, Lee J. Cobb is one of my favorite underrated actors that doesn't get enough love. Fantastic on the Waterfront. So many films he's great in, and people don't give him enough love. And that's why I love this movie so much, because it gives him the shot. Like John Polito in Miller's Crossing, you find these character actors, you give them the right role that shows you, yeah, they do character work to pay the bills, but they're really actually damn good as an actor, and Lee J. Cobb is fantastic.
Well, he's great, and he's called upon to do a not so fun thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is he plays a guy who is angry and
Yes.
just unreasonable and wants this guy dead for reasons that are not rational.
What are you talking about? I mean, we're all going crazy in here or something.
The kid is guilty. Why don't you listen to the facts?
It's his own broken soul over what happened with his son.
But what he does,
we don't know
and
that at the beginning. Yeah.
what he does, and what's good acting is you got to do it. You can't apologize
Right.
for the character that you're playing. You can't know, oh, I'm playing the bad guy.
Yeah.
I'm playing a jerk. If you do that, you're doomed.
Right.
You're playing the guy who's right, the guy who's the only sensible, clear thinking person in the room. And he passionately and strongly and irrationally fights that fight through the whole movie.
Absolutely.
And if he's not good, the movie falls.
Right.
Yeah.
All the best actors say this in interviews who play villains. You have to believe that the villain has a reason for why they're doing what they're doing. You have to believe in the reason. That lets you play it not as a villain, but as a
Right.
person who just believes this and is following what they think is the right way to think.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
E.G. Marshall.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. He, to me, is the opposite side of Lee J. Cobb.
Right. Yes.
Which is E.G. Marshall is the second hardest person to convince.
He is, for different reasons.
And he is a stockbroker, businessman, obviously well-educated. He wears glasses. He speaks softly. He's very articulate.
He doesn't sweat.
Doesn't sweat, apparently. And he is the best match for Henry Fonda in the movie. But he is 100% logical.
Right.
And when the preponderance of evidence goes to the other side, he goes, I'm wrong.
I'm convinced. Not guilty.
Yes, and he's the last domino to fall before Lee J. Cobb,
Yep.
because that's the last wall, which
Yeah.
is always the hardest wall.
So in a way, he's the opposite of Lee J. Cobb, because Lee J. Cobb is all emotion.
Yes.
And he is responding to it emotionally. E.G. Marshall is all logic.
Yeah.
And when his own logic is thrown back to him, he goes, okay.
Yeah.
And accepts it.
Yeah.
A great, great character. Jack Klugman. I love Jack Klugman.
He really is.
He's so great.
He's so fun. And you know, the part was originally written for a 21-year-old who was supposed to be the same race as the
Makes sense.
As the defendant. So when they cast Jack Klugman, he was 35 years old and a white guy. And he went to Sidney Lumet and said, I don't think I'm the right person for this. And Sidney said, trust me, for what I'm doing, it'll work. And damn it if it doesn't.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, and because Jack Klugman has such chops.
Yes.
He's one of those great working actors who's never not good. If you like, I highly recommend, if you like The Twilight Zone, which I love.
Oh, yeah.
There's like 2 or 3 episodes where
Yeah.
Jack Klugman shows up, and he's so good. He's such a good actor, and he gives such vulnerability. And he's this character who, because his backstory is just what you say.
Yeah.
He came from the streets in
Yeah.
some way, and he's insecure about that. And he's with these people that are, that he feels being judged by it. And you see him push back, and you see him fight, and you see him kind of get the strength to stand up for himself.
Yeah. And he doesn't change his mind, and he doesn't waffle, and he fights back to anyone who tries to confront him, and not in a negative way. He fights back by standing his ground. He doesn't fight back to attack.
Oh, now just wait a minute. Listen, you can't talk to me like that. No, who do you think you are?
Down.
Yeah.
And that's what's so good about his character. And Steve, that's a great way to describe him, because he is that guy who feels a little bit out of place in this room full of people who might be smarter than him. So he doesn't like overplay his hand.
Yeah.
He's very clear about what he's doing.
And you see him kind of go with the flow
Yes.
at first, and
Yes.
then he goes, "Oh, wait a minute,
Right.
wait a minute! You can't can't say that.
Right.
You know, and particularly when it comes at him,
Yeah.
when the race stuff and the, you know, you're one of them kind of comes at him. And it's funny because even though visually it doesn't work at all, emotionally it works.
It does. And when Lee J. Cobb goes after him and then and has that confrontation, and then later Lee J. comes up to him and was like, I just got a bit emotional. I got a little hot. You know how it is. I got a little hot under the collar, trying to re-cement that connection because he hasn't voted not guilty yet.
Yeah.
Jack Klugman hasn't.
Jack Warden.
Yeah, Jack Ward. For people who don't know, like, go watch The Verdict with Paul Newman and Jack Warden. Jack Warden is fantastic in The Verdict, and he has been in numerous films.
Another Sidney Lumet film, by the way.
You're right, exactly, and in numerous films, and he's played so many great hard characters, evil characters, good characters, fun characters, playful characters. The man is so talented all around the board, and he does a great job playing this New York guy who just wants to go see the Yankees play Cleveland, and he's got the hat on, and he's got the right outfit, and the rapid-fire delivery, which people like this.
Yeah, and he's a salesman.
Yes.
And he's like, I care about selling the point or not, so let's get down to brass tacks.
Right.
The interesting thing with him, I think he might be the least moral person in this jury.
Absolutely, because when he switches to not guilty, even the people who are on the not guilty side go, wait a minute, you're not doing it for the right reasons.
Because he just wants to get out of there.
He just wants to go see the game.
I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm getting a little tired of this yakety-yakking back and forth. It's getting us nowhere. So I guess I'll have to break it up. I changed my vote to not guilty.
You what? You heard me. I had enough.
What do you mean you've had enough? That's no answer.
Hey, listen, you just take care of yourself, huh? You know?
He's right. That's not an answer. What kind of a man are you? You have sat here and voted guilty with everyone else because there are some baseball tickets burning a hole in your pocket. And now you've changed your vote because you say you're sick of all the talking here?
Now, listen, buddy.
Who tells you that you have the right to play like this with a man's life? Don't you care?
Now, wait a minute. You can't talk like that to me.
I can talk like that to you. If you want to vote not guilty, then do it because you are convinced the man is not guilty, not because you've had enough. And if you think he is guilty, then vote that way.
Right.
Yeah, Lee J. Cobb passionately believes what he believes.
He does.
Ed Begley, he believes what he believes.
Right, exactly.
He might be a racist.
Right.
But he has a moral core. It's a racist moral core.
Right.
Whereas Jack Warden has no moral core.
Right.
He just I just want to get out of here.
Yeah. He's a bit sociopathic in that way.
Yeah. But again, you watch his mannerisms, you watch his behavior, you watch him looking at the other people, and you see why he's a salesman.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get along. I'm trying to make a deal with you to get what I want, and what I want is to get out of here.
But he combos ball busting with trying to connect with them. Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's ball busting, soft sell. It's hard sell, soft
right,
sell.
exactly. Ball
He's a
busting, soft sell.
salesman.
Absolutely.
That's what he's doing.
Yep.
Ed Begley, we already talked about a little bit.
So good.
Yeah, and again, not a fun part to play.
No.
To play they're all alike guy.
And his anger, I would say, is worse than Lee J. Cobb's anger because Lee J. Cobb's anger is understandable. It's misguided. It's from a broken heart. Whereas this guy's anger is from deep within his soul.
Yeah.
And it's nasty.
Well, and there's this beautifully filmed moment where we kind of peg him as a racist fairly early in the movie, but it's contained on a certain level.
Yeah.
And then when things start turning against him, when slowly but surely, one by one, people start to say not guilty.
Yeah.
Ed Begley goes off.
Yes.
And he goes on a racist rant, and one by one, beautifully staged, each of the jurors stand up and turn their back on him. And it's right on the edge of being too theatrical.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, Steve.
It's right on the edge of we're in a movie. This is a movie moment, but it's so good.
Yeah, it's earned because of everything that's come before it, performance-wise, directing-wise, and composition-wise as a film, that moment works, even though it's very much a theater moment. It works on film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and is powerful. Very powerful.
Martin Balsam.
Oh, such a fantastic actor. Loved him in so many things, Psycho, numerous films, what have you. He's got one of these amazing, great voices that's deep within his neck and throat, but that there's an earnestness to him. But there's also a passive-aggressive nature to him, which I discovered this time around when they come at him about being in charge of the jury, and he goes, well, you do it. You want to do it, you do it.
Listen, just because I'm trying to keep this thing organized, here, you take it. You take on the responsibility. I'll just keep my mouth shut, that's all.
What are you getting so hot about? Calm down, will you?
Well, don't tell me to calm down. Here, you want to take the chair? Just take the chair, that's all.
Just a seat at the front.
Listen, you think it's funny or
Hey,
something?
forget it, fella. The whole thing's unimportant. Come on.
Unimportant? Oh, here, you try.
No, nobody wants to change. You're doing a beautiful job. Sit down.
Yeah, you're doing great. Just great, fella.
And Martin Balsam, in one of these rare moments of a window into who this guy really is, says, "Brother, I don't care what you do." And that's fascinating. And you're the foreman.
Right.
And you're giving away your power in that moment, and you're being childish. Why? Because you've been challenged as a man by other men.
Right.
And that's the thing that opens up.
And you've watched him through the film do this really hard job.
It is.
Of manage this thing. And you see him do a really good job because it's it's a weird position, which is that you are ostensibly in charge.
Yeah.
But you're not in charge in a way that's earned. You're not. These people don't really have to listen to you.
Yeah.
And so I've been through this with my friends of like, I'm the person who's kind of supposed to be getting us somewhere, but I have to do it with everyone's goodwill.
Right.
You know what I mean? And therefore, you can't just say, hey, we're going to do this, you do this. He keeps going, so maybe we'll take another vote if that's all right with everybody. And he's trying to lead through coalition, through compromise, and you could see his frustration and his insecurity and all that stuff bubbling underneath leading up to the moment that you're talking about. And that's real.
Yeah.
It just feels real.
Exactly. When I cast the play, I cast Holly Thompson, who was at the time the creator of the Tallahassee Little Theater. And because she carried weight in that city, she was the perfect one to choose. All these other actors that I cast underneath her to play all the different roles, I knew would follow her as the foreman on the jury. And that was built in with the casting in my mind. This is a woman who already commands respect with these actors already outside of this play. So if she brings that, they can fall into line perfectly, and it's not acting. It's just natural.
Good.
That's the way it would. Yeah. It's an unsung and most important part of this movie is Martin Balsam as the foreman, because he's guiding them where they need to go.
Yeah, so we're not going to go through all 12 of them. We got through a bunch. There's also the advertising guy who speaks in advertising speak. Yep. We have the Italian or Eastern European immigrant who, and you see one of the wonderful things I like watching him is the slow process of his thinking, is that he's methodically thinking through the problem. And once he comes to a certain place, he goes, oh, I've gone to the other side.
Right, because he's a watchmaker. So to him, it's parts.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, great
parts
point.
Put together to lead into a creation. Yeah. And what's great about him is that he is the one representative in that room who is not necessarily white.
Yeah.
Right. And so his accent, and I love how he corrects the grammar on juror number 10. And by the way, we should say that there are no names in this movie. Right. Everyone is juror number whatever. They never say their names to each other. Even when Lee J. Cobb hands his card to E.G. Marshall, he never says, my name is blah, blah, blah. He says just the name of his delivery service.
Right.
And that's that whole thing. It keeps it still universal because there are no names.
That's a great point. Yeah. We also have the old man, who,
so heartbreaking.
Yeah, who has this kind of wisdom and slow way of speech. Yeah. And at the beginning, I think everyone's trying to, with the exception of juror number 8, is trying to please each other.
Yes,
and we're trying to get along, and we all agree he's guilty, and that's going to be it.
Right.
As we go along, we start to see what I think juror number 8, Henry Fonda's character, does is say, this is a boy's life. Mm-hmm. This is serious. Even if he's guilty, even if we all agree he's guilty, it deserves us taking the time and really thinking about it.
We owe him a few words.
And the old man is really, I think, the first one who really does that.
Yeah, he's the first one that votes not guilty.
And again, you get into this politics of group dynamics.
Right. This guy's trying to bully them into voting guilty, whereas Henry Fonda is trying to approach it from a logical place.
Right. By the way, have you ever served on a jury?
Yes, twice.
And they say, basically, don't be 12 Angry Men. Mm-hmm. Your job is not to investigate the crime.
Right.
And yet that is, in fact, exactly what they do. They reinvestigate the crime.
And it has to, because it's a film that has to do that. It's how you keep the audience.
And so they call for evidence. They go over material. They figure out that the old man who witnessed the murder, not the old man in our movie, he couldn't have walked from here to there in the time he said.
Right.
That the woman who saw it through the train couldn't have turned over, and she must have worn glasses. Yeah. And the old man was hiding his injury, and the knife that the prosecution said there was unusual, could never find it. Well, Henry Fonda found a knife exactly right like it. And we go through the logic of this mystery.
This is the cheat of the movie, that at the end of the movie, you don't know if Henry Fonda was right all along or not.
Whether he's guilty or not. That was what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, that's what's so great about the movie. Henry Fonda could possibly be absolutely wrong about this, and the kid killed his father, and he's letting murder walk free.
Well, first of all, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
But here's what I think is the bigger point. Mm-hmm. The bigger point is Henry Fonda is completely right, because the prosecution did not prove this beyond a reasonable doubt.
Correct. Very good point, Steve.
Because when you said this is a movie about America, I totally agree. Because not only is it about these are American people. This is a cross section of America struggling with American things.
Yeah.
But we exist within this legal system.
Yeah.
And the legal system is that we believe that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that's difficult. What that means is that guilty people are going to go free.
Right.
And we would rather have guilty people go free than innocent people go to jail. That is an essential American value. And that essential American value is not easy. It hurts. Some values hurt.
Because
that's why they're worth it.
Exactly, and because real people are affected by these values, real family members, real loved ones are affected by this system we have in place.
Well, and if you look at the Innocence Project and the, DNA evidence and all these things that are happening, we're seeing all across the country all these innocent people being let free who served 10, 20, 30, 40 years in prison for things they didn't do.
Which speaks to the human condition and its ability to endure its situation, adapt to it, and get along with it or overcome it. And that's what's so amazing. Every time they let one of these people out who has not killed themselves in prison, because they're looking at 40 years for a crime they didn't commit, which would push the limits of most people to accept this situation. They've done it, and when they walk out, there is such a joy on their faces that they're finally free. But I bet they never get a really fully peaceful night of sleep, because you're always afraid there's going to be some other evidence that comes up that sends you right back into that hole.
I can't imagine. Yeah. And we go back to the moment of Henry Fonda, because without juror number 8, that guy's decided guilty within 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's guilty. And Henry Fonda says, I don't know, it deserves a little bit of time. That moment is to protect that guy 40 years down the line, convicted for the thing he didn't commit.
Right.
Is that responsibility, that American citizenship is responsibility.
Yes. At times, it's almost irrelevant that they're talking about a case. What they're really talking about is racism in this country. It's an underlying current through the whole film.
Absolutely.
And because of some of the comments that people
racism
make.
And the preconceived notions about class, and the preconceived
about culture,
and about looking at, because they describe him, this kid was a bad kid, he'd been in trouble, he'd been in fights.
Right.
And Henry Fonda's response is like, well, he didn't have a mother and he didn't have a home. And he grew up in a place where there are fights all the time. It's very hard for him not to be in fights. And then what do we take with the information? Because we see this all the time, particularly today when we have issues of crime and descriptions of people's history as predictors of the future. And that's really difficult, And it's like to me, the lesson of this, I mean, there are a lot of lessons of this film, but one of the lessons is before you judge someone else, you got to judge yourself.
Right.
What's the quote? It's before you take something out of someone else's eye.
Before you judge the speck in your brother's eye, look at the log in your own eye.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. I knew you would get that.
Well, being Catholic,
yeah. The Jews don't have that quote.
No, you guys have the Old Testament. That's
But I love the quote. I mean, I think that's what this is. That the first thing these jurors have to do is take the blinders off.
Yeah, which is once again the battle that we have in this country between people who want to convict someone just because they're a color, or they come from a bad background, or they come from a race, or they come from a country that has this kind of stuff in it, versus people who want to be, no, let's try to understand what happened here. Let's try to look at what this kid might have been going through, what he might be. And remember, he's still a kid processing right and wrong.
Right.
He doesn't understand, and we don't know what the dad did. So it's just, there's so much here that is, you get to see both sides of this country right here in this play, and it still resonates almost 60 years later.
I want to go back because I think we have to keep hitting this original point, which he might have done it.
He might have done it, yes.
In fact, there's a good chance he did it.
Yes.
What the film does is disprove or bring doubt onto the prosecution.
Right.
What it doesn't do, I mean, like, for instance, and I won't say my opinion's going to be somewhat clear.
Please go ahead.
Is in the OJ trial, that's what they did.
Yeah.
They brought doubt onto the prosecution's case.
Yep.
They didn't show that anybody else could have killed him.
Right. And I think after watching that FX show and watching the 10-part or 7-part ESPN documentary on it, there's no way you don't think he did it. There's no way. There's just no way. You have to really do mental gymnastics to not believe
it seems almost impossible to think he didn't do it. And so that's a case of, that is the system, is that if the defense can create enough doubt, then that person will go free. And that's what happens in this film.
Right. And absolutely that is a balancing thing, because of so many times black jurors have been convicted who were not guilty on circumstantial evidence or evidence that isn't valid, just put them in jail. So there was a balance in the other direction with this case, and it's not valid, it's not good, it's not correct. But it seemed like that's what happened.
Well, and this is why we have to fight for the system to be better.
Yes.
Is that the ideals of the system are great.
Right.
But the practicality of the system, because of overworked courtrooms and jurors with bias and defense attorneys who with no resources and
economic stressors
and
that
economic
these jurors
stresses
have to go back and work to pay their bills.
And that these things just don't work out fair. And so we, and you look at the sentences given to African Americans and people of color, and that they're disproportionately long sentences and all these things. Well, it goes back to things we see in 12 Angry Men.
Right.
Is that those biases that people bring into the courthouse, they exist. And maybe it means a year or longer. Maybe it means a couple years longer.
Right.
Maybe the person was really guilty to begin with. But that's why we have to keep working on it. One of the interesting things about the film to me is that it's a puzzle. It's a closed door mystery. Even though we never meet the criminal, we're never out a detective.
Right.
We're in this room trying to solve a mystery, and it's real intelligence on how they approach that puzzle.
Well, that's the thing. What's interesting about the film, because of these people that they've chosen to be in the film, these characters, these actors, and these characters, they bring a certain level of intelligence to this conversation, to the deconstruction of the facts, to the reinvestigating of the crime, as you stated earlier. We are looking at these people who are capable of doing it, and their logic is understandable, relatable, and their logic sometimes against it is also something you've seen before and can digest.
Not just intelligence, although that's certainly there, but experience.
Yes.
Is that each of these individuals brings different things. It's not that Henry Fonda came in and solved the case.
No, right.
It's that he has doubts, but it's the old man who had observed the old man who's the witness.
That's such a great moment.
And goes, did you look at him?
Did you see the tear under his jacket?
Yeah.
Like, why would someone wear something like that to court?
Yeah. And did you see the way he walked?
Yeah.
And did you see the... and what he's doing is he's saying, look, I'm an old man, and obviously a very observant old man.
Yeah.
and I'm an old man, and I'm seeing things that you don't see. Yeah. And so if he's not on the jury bringing his piece of information, they don't deconstruct the old man's destiny.
Right.
Like the old man's lonely. He hasn't had someone listen to him in a long time.
Right.
He wants to believe that he's important.
Right.
That analysis of the character and we only get that because we have our old man on the jury.
Right. But once again, it's circumstantial. Who knows if anything he said about that old man is true? And that's what's great about this. I don't mean to keep saying what this is great, but that's what I enjoy about the film so much is that every one of these reasons that they come up with here with their intelligence because of their relatability to what's happening or to the witnesses is all circumstantial. It's all circumstantial.
It's all made up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's your choice to believe it or not believe it.
Well, or there's the moment where they're talking about the angle of the knife when it goes in.
Oh yeah.
And Lee J. Cobb, maybe this one's a little too far for me too.
Right.
But Lee J. Cobb takes the knife and he holds it in an overhand grip and he says, I need someone to demonstrate with.
Right.
And there's Henry Fonda.
Of course.
And they've had a argument and there's this long pause where Lee J. Cobb looks at the knife and looks at Henry Fonda and looks at the knife and then he raises the knife like he's going to stab him and everyone goes, and Lee J. Cobb goes, no, we're all good here. And I'm like, all right, they dragged that out a little too long for me.
Well, it's the 1950s.
It's a little too long. But anyway.
But I like Fonda's stance that he's not scared.
Yeah, absolutely.
He stands there waiting.
And Lee J. Cobb is standing as a short man, which the killer is a short person, and he's holding the knife over his head, and that creates the downward angle of the wound.
Right.
And then Jack Klugman, who grew up on the street, says, you don't use that kind of knife that way.
Right, you go underhand.
You go underhand because it's a switchblade, which they call a switch knife, which always sounds kind of strange to me. But he says you got to go underhand because you would never because to do an overhand grip with a switchblade, you'd have to switch grips. And this is all a knife about speed. So anyone who grew up on the street, like I did, would know that. So again, like the old man, Jack Klugman brings his experience.
Yeah.
Without him, we don't unlock that piece of the mystery.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's so great about that moment is it's been built up because Fonda has been slowly turning Cobb's points on each other. Yeah. He was an old man. He wasn't sure about what he was going to say. He wasn't sure about half the stuff he was going to say. Boom, close up on Lee J. Cobb's face, digesting the words he's just said that basically undercut his argument for the old man.
What's the matter with you guys? You all know he's guilty. He's got to burn. You're letting him slip through our fingers.
Slip through our fingers? Are you his executioner?
I'm one of them.
Perhaps you'd like to pull the switch.
For this kid, you bet I would.
I feel sorry for you. What it must feel like to want to pull the switch. Ever since you walked into this room, you've been acting like a self-appointed public avenger. You want to see this boy die because you personally want it, not because of the facts. You're a sadist.
Kill him out! Kill him!
You don't really mean you'll kill me, do you?
You don't really mean you're going to kill me, do you?
Right.
And that's boo. And
because we've established earlier that the kid said, I'm going to kill you to his father. And Lee J. Cobb said, no one says I'm going to kill you unless they mean it.
That's what I'm saying. That's what's so great. So that when that moment happens with the knife, I think it's the first time that we get a small glimpse into Henry Fonda's character, not juror number 8, understanding juror number 3. Understanding his anger, understanding where that's coming from. Because he doesn't react to him doing the knife into his chest because he understands that he has the power here, not juror number 3. In that moment, like he understands that this man is a broken man.
And this is good storytelling, is that it's good the way you're using the camera. What you're focusing on is I know we said this in other podcasts, but a lot of acting is reacting, and a lot of directing is reaction shots. It's not the thing that Henry Fonda says. It's watching E.G. Marshall react to the thing that Henry Fonda says, or watch, because you see the moments that they start to turn. You see them see the knife, see the stance, hear the words, and go, "Oh, I have to think about this differently."
And none of them overplay it.
No.
When those moments happen for them. I think one of my favorite moments in the film is when Balsam and Fonda are sitting at the window after the rain started, and Balsam tells that story about being rained out and baseball and what have you, and there's a correlation to what's happening here.
Oh,
right?
That's great.
There was a desire that something was going to occur, but rain, outside forces, unexpected thing happens and stops it from happening. And this is what you see in a small way of what Fonda is doing in that jury room.
Well, and this is the little things that go into directing, too, is that Sidney Lumet, by the way, has a fantastic book called Making Movies.
Yep.
And this is my favorite book on directing, I think. Like, it is the most straightforward, the most practical, and his philosophy of directing is very much how I would want to be as a director, or have tried to be. And one of the things he talks about is just those little decisions you make in terms of, for instance, starting with the high-angle wide-end lenses and ending up with the lower-angle long lenses. Well, another one is weather.
Yeah.
What's the weather?
Yeah.
And they go, when they get into that place, it's hot.
Yeah.
You know, you get the choice. Should it be cold? Should it be nothing? Should it be room temperature, or should it be hot? Well, hot's better.
Yeah.
You know, and then as the sun starts to go down and then it starts pouring rain, and then the fan wouldn't work at the beginning because the fan was connected to the light switch, didn't work until they turned the light switch on. Now the fan's suddenly going. That just, does it add a ton to the movie? No. Does it add a little to the movie that's really good? Yes.
Well, you feel the claustrophobia, right? They're in this room. It's hot. It's in New York. You would imagine it's in New York. It's in baseball. Starts in April, so it's probably in the middle of June or July in the hottest months.
Yeah.
And then you have these rainstorms, and people who've lived
Big
on the East
summer
Coast,
rainstorms.
big summer rainstorms are the worst because it's like having a wet warm blanket thrown on your entire body.
I don't know,
And
it's better
so
than the
irritating.
humidity. I'd rather, like, when that rain comes, I'll go out and go, oh, thank God. At least something changed.
But either way, you have this feeling that they're in a hot box, they're in a sweat box, being pushed to the limit, you know?
Except for E.G. Marshall, who does not sweat.
Until that one moment.
Yeah. So there's something that I don't like about the movie.
Ooh, let's do it.
Well, and really what I have to say is, you know, as we said before, you judge movies for their time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something that happened a lot, particularly in the 50s, was we are going to get to the mystery and there's going to be a thing that explains it. The little, and it's particularly at the rise of psychoanalysis and the rise of, oh, you do this because your father beat you up.
Right.
And now that we know this, we've solved the problem.
Right.
Is that Lee J. Cobb's explanation for why he's doing what he's doing has just always been a little too pat for me.
Okay.
You know,
can you explain? Can you elaborate?
Well, you know, the basic setup is he had some conflict with his son,
right,
and which lays unresolved, and so he is acting out against this kid, and because of his unresolved conflict with his son.
Right.
It's everyone else's. It's a little personal and a little like, I don't know. I've never loved it. I love Lee J. Cobb. I love I love the. I'm not bad mouthing the movie. It's just always, I'm doing this because of this. It's too much of a one-to-one relationship for me.
I've always loved it because it allows him to not be a full villain. It allows you to have sympathy for him by the end of the movie because the way the Cobb is so determined to play it that way, so determined to be right in this moment for his own reasons, that when when that moment happens and he rips the picture of his son, which always makes me cry.
Yeah.
There's such a power in that because I know that anger. I've had that anger personally in my life in my younger years. So when he has that moment, I feel such a powerful sympathy for him that I accept his reasonings for why he's doing what he's doing. He's working something out because he's not an intelligent man, an emotionally intelligent man. He has to hit everything with a hammer to understand it, to get through it. And this is one thing he can't. And it's destroying him because he loves his son so much, but he's unable to express love to him in a way that his son understands. So when he's broken, when he walks in that jury room, and the fight, everything, he could have just, he could have had a physical fight with his son, and his son has moved out, his son has left him, his son has disowned him. This is what he's carrying into the room, right? I can bring that to the movie myself, which is why I accept it. And when he has that moment when he rips the picture and the pain with which he tries to reassemble the ripped portions of the picture is so devastatingly powerful that I just feel nothing but an affinity for this storyline, an affinity for this, what you say, the one-to-one. I don't have a problem with it because I understand it. I've known men like this. I've been a man like this. So I know this, You
know what? You're right.
No, I don't. I'm not trying to be right. It's my own point of view.
Well, because I mean, this is, and again, it's why I think this is good. You and I doing this show together is I'm always going to sit back intellectually a little bit, and so me as the playwright,
absolutely,
as the person thinking like that would be a technique that I wouldn't want to use,
right?
But you expressing how you felt, I'm like, yeah, if you felt that, you're right. You know what I mean? And the other thing about it is that we get this amazing, remarkable moment at the end where Henry Fonda helps him on with his jacket.
Yes.
What do you think's happening there?
It's the reason that Henry Fonda defends the kid is the reason that Henry Fonda puts the jacket on Lee J. Cobb. He understands people and does not see them as good or evil. He looks for the reasonings and the reason why they are the way they are.
And he's compassionate.
And the only people that can find the reasons why people do are compassionate people because they want to understand and not vilify people. They want to understand them so they can see why they did what they did, what motivates them to do the things that they're doing. That's important. And I think that's why it's such a great moment when he puts the jacket on him. He's not saying, I'm judging you, you're evil, you deserve to be banished. He's saying, I understand, man to man, my heart breaks for you. I have 3 kids. I understand. And that's such a powerful moment. He's putting a soldier's armor back on him,
right?
Is what he's doing in that jacket,
and giving him some love, the kind of love that he could expect.
Yes.
Like if he put his armor on the guy, he'd get punched in the face.
No,
but just giving him that jacket is a little bit of I acknowledge you.
Yeah.
And it's not that Henry Fonda likes Lee J. Cobb.
No, not necessarily. Right.
Yeah, it's just that it gives him compassion and acknowledgement as a human being.
Right. Which we all could use more of in this world.
Right. Even to the person who's the one of the 2 really not good guys in this room.
Right. But he's only temporarily not good. Right. Whereas I think juror number 10 is absolutely not good for the life.
Yeah, he's a racist.
That's a bitter, frustrated old man that's going to die like Corleone, like Michael does at the end of Godfather 3. He's going to die sitting alone in some chair.
But not nearly as scenically. No. I think he's just going to be like an old folks home or something.
Right. One
more just a minor thing. It goes to, again, these small decisions. Henry Fonda's wearing a white suit.
Yes, true. Yes, that's I think that I always chalked it up to 1950s. But please.
Well, and it's not just that he's a good guy.
Yeah,
it's that everybody else is wearing complicated things. They're wearing a jacket, and the costuming is really good. It's very smart.
Yeah,
and that kind of white linen summer suit that he's wearing separates him in this way and makes him other.
Yes.
He is not of these guys. These guys are more, Henry Fonda's clearly, with the exception of E.G. Marshall, better educated. He lives a very, very different life.
Yeah.
And just, you make small decisions, but that white suit is really important, I think.
Do we ever find out what his job is?
He's an architect.
Architect. See, and that's the thing, right? His job is to design things. His job is to put things together in a certain way that works, right? And so he's able to be distant, to be above, to be aloof, because for him, it's about designing structure. It's not about working with human beings all the time.
So normally I'd ask you for your final thoughts. I want to give my final thoughts first. is
I love this. Yes, go ahead.
well because this is
No,
I think
no, because you started the show saying the same thing. Like normally we ask you, John,
Yeah.
what are you, but I want it, so I like it. It's totally uniform.
Yeah. So I was thinking about like why do we care about this movie? Why? And obviously we've said passionately about why we care about it in terms of the legal system, in terms of America and all that. I also think this is so different from the kinds of movies we see today.
Yes.
Is that the vast majority of the movies we see today, particularly the studio movies, are concerned with very big things.
Yes.
It's not just one person's life in jeopardy. It's the world is in jeopardy. And the characters are big. And the actions are big.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem with that kind of movie. I like going to see that kind of movie.
Yeah.
But there's something that you get when you decide to examine something that's very small.
Yeah.
There's something that you get in intimacy that you can't get in grandiosity.
Right.
You know, and there's something here in this film of we're going to look at one action, this murder. We're going to look at these 12 people and we're going to see their humanness and how they behave. And there's something that you get here that you can't get with the movies that are being made today.
Right.
And I think that's really sad.
Well, the main studio movies.
The main studio
Yeah,
movies.
right.
Well, and the interesting thing is that the independent films tend to be very dark, very different,
Yes.
very avant-garde, very intense.
Very much alternate programming.
Whereas this is mainstream.
Yeah.
And that what we don't get is the small mainstream intimate story. We get it more in television.
Yeah.
Much more in television
Yes.
than we do in film.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is something we really need. Because particularly today when we're facing big things in the world,
Yeah.
big, serious social issues. And we don't solve those social issues by watching Thor save the planet. You know, it's not that I don't want to watch that.
Very good point.
I like Captain America. I like Star Wars. I like those things.
Right.
But watching what happens in a courtroom, that's things we need to be looking at. Watching how people behave, watching our legal system, watching the peer pressure of politics and conflict within our society. We got to do that in a real way, not in a grandiose way, in a real human, natural way. And that's why we need movies like this.
Absolutely, Stephen. I totally 100% agree with you. I think for me, I'm okay with it for now. There are enough independent films that keep me satisfied for the exploration of the human condition. A Lobster being one of them, which I saw a few weeks ago. But when those films, the Supermans, the Thors, the new versions of them rather, win Oscars, then I'll weep for the film community.
Yeah.
Until then, I hold out hope that the trend changes. John Campy, who's one of the guys at Collider, who is at Comic-Con HQ and Film HQ, he said, like, it was so funny that 10 years ago I was trying to convince people to go to comic book movies, and now I'm trying to convince people to go to regular movies.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. It's changed.
When I was a geeky kid, this was my fantasy.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Someday people will understand how great, Daredevil is or whatever, all these things. And I'm the same thing. I'm sort of going, look, yeah, it is great, but hey, what happened to that other stuff?
Right.
What happened to Amadeus? And what happened to those movies? Don't exist anymore.
Where are those epics?
Yeah.
And they do get lost. And
epics and intimate films and just the whole range, and comedies and romances and the whole range of filmmaking. It's like getting knocked out.
Right. Well, that's what epics do really well. Grandiose, but with what did you say? Limited. What were you saying?
I have no idea.
Intimate moments. Well,
Okay.
right? Because Arabia has that in spades.
Yeah.
Right. The best epics have that in spades. Okay. My final thoughts is what I agree 1,000% with what Steve said, but I also think what's so great about this movie is this is the time in the 50s and 60s where we did these kind of courtroom dramas. We were interested in exploring these cases, and our jury system, our legal system. It was an exposition of our legal system as not being 100% infallible, correct, untouchable. And so we saw Witness for the Prosecution, which is a fantastic film. You see this film, Anatomy of a Murder. You see these things that explored. Even Runaway Jury recently, a few years ago, with Gene Hackman and Pacino and Rachel Weisz and John Cusack. You see that exploration of these issues, of these topics, and what you have here when you break it on down is a case for America discussing race relations and race issues in a courtroom over a case about a boy killing his father, committing patricide possibly. And that's something. Why would he commit patricide? What does it mean to commit patricide? And how much of their own father instincts, their own instincts as men and as fathers and as sons bleed into why they are the way they are in this jury room. And for me, it's just a beautiful, fantastic character study of men. And if you're a man and you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a favor. Thanks for listening. But do yourself a favor, rent it, watch it, see it, explore it, give us your comments, because I'm telling you, you will get something really powerful out of it. Something you hadn't thought about before.
And you might even see yourself.
Yes.
A little bit.
Absolutely.
And maybe you won't see yourself. Maybe you just go, oh, I'm Henry Fonda. Mm-hmm. But maybe you'll see something else.
Most people believe they're Henry Fonda when they're not. And they'll see something else.
You might have a little bit of Henry Fonda,
Sure,
but maybe you were a little insecure about expressing your opinion like Jack Klugman.
Yeah.
Or maybe you needed time to process through things like the Eastern European guy. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're trying to manage the group and getting frustrated like Martin Balsam.
Yeah, or you're maybe juror number 6 who constantly defends the old man, defends Klugman, like he doesn't want anybody saying anything untowards each other. He wants to maintain a level of civility and respect.
And maybe you're just a horrible racist.
And if you are, please stop being so.
Yes. And on that note, we would love to hear your comments, but not your racist ones.
Yes, please.
You can visit us on Facebook. We're at the Cine-Files. That's the CINE-FILES. Yeah. We definitely could use your reviews on iTunes. They really, really help. And if you would like to reach me, you can reach me on Twitter at SRMorris. John, where can they reach you?
You guys can always reach me at The Rocha Says, ROCHA, on Twitter and on Instagram. I do respond as much as I can to anybody who comments and sends me stuff. My voiceover animation podcast that some of you knew about, Cast of Characters, that I did with Yuri Lowenthal, is getting fast-tracked at Geek and Sundry on their Twitch channel. The potential name of it at this point is Super Animation Game Time. And we will be interviewing people who are successful in voiceover animation, whether they're a voice, whether they're a creator, a writer, a producer, a director, any number, or a technician, a board operator. Like we interview everybody involved with animation and video games and voiceover, and talk to them about their lives and who they are as people. And if we get to their work, we get to their work. But it's more of an interview with these people talking about their lives and what led them to do what they do and what makes them tick.
Well, that's great. Give me the name again.
Oh yeah, Super Animation Game Time. And
Super Animation Game Time.
Yeah, and we're gonna release it on the like I said, on the Geek and Sundry Twitch channel. I just don't stop. That's basically what I'm trying to tell you.
You just talk and talk.
I really do. Somebody needs to give me a radio show and pay me for it. I would absolutely do it every day, 3 hours a day.
Yeah, we have you, John Rocha, on Morning Drive Time. Welcome to the Rocha House.
Welcome.
All right, and on that note, that is it for this time, and we will see you next time on the Cine-Files.